Hi, my name is Gray Basnight. I'm a New Yorker. I've been in New York now about 38 years. I'm a native Richmonder, and I just published my second novel. My second novel is called Shadows in the Fire. It's a historical set in Richmond, and it takes place principally over 3 days in April 1865 when a whole bunch of historic stuff happened. One nonfiction writer actually called April 1865 the month that saved America. This, of course, is fiction. My novel is about the fall of Richmond as the capital of the Confederacy. It takes place over April 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in 1865. On April the 2nd, Jefferson Davis was sitting inside St. Paul's Episcopal Church during Sunday worship services when a messenger walked into church, interrupted services, and handed him a note. The note was from Robert E. Lee at Petersburg, and it said, "Am evacuating Petersburg, must do same in Richmond." That's a paraphrasing, but then the President of the Confederacy got up and walked right out of church services, and everybody else in service panicked. They knew it was significant. They didn't know what that note said, but they panicked. Then word leaked, and everybody started evacuating. Anyone who could evacuate Richmond would, because they knew the Union Army was right outside of town and they didn't want to face the Yankees. Well, then Sunday night, the city burned. It burned largely because the evacuating Confederate Army that had been guarding the city was instructed to destroy all tobacco, all warehouses full of cotton, and all liquor. And the reason is because they didn't want that stuff to help finance advancement of the Union Army. Also, they didn't want the Yankees to get drunk and assault all the women, which is what they assumed would happen. Unfortunately, the fire brigade had evacuated as well, so about 1/3 of the business district of Richmond burned to the ground because the Confederates themselves accidentally set fire to their own capital. That was Sunday night. Later Sunday night, the city was looted by so-called persisters, people who couldn't afford a horse or a buggy to get out of town. On Monday, the Union Army marched into town. Not a shot was fired. Nobody was assaulted. They restored order. They put out the fires. And much of the extinguishing of fires and overturning of ash and pulling down of semi-fallen buildings was done by black men wearing Union blue. And that was a choice the Union Army commander of the occupation of Richmond made as an intentional psychological punishment, essentially, for the Confederacy and for the people of Richmond to see exactly who was occupying them, who was restoring order, who was putting out the fires, and who was assisting them in restoring order and returning Richmond and the state of Virginia to the Union. And then something remarkable happened on the third day, Tuesday, April the 4th, 1865. A man named President Abraham Lincoln stepped off of a barge on the James River, walked right up through the burned out district, past the capital of Virginia, which was then the capital of the Confederacy. And then he walked up to the White House of the Confederacy where he had a meeting. Now, he didn't need to go there. He had no business being there. They didn't want him to go there. They were afraid he would get shot because of the threat of snipers, but he went anyway. He overruled all instructions pertaining to his safety. And of course, he was assassinated 10 days later. But while he was walking through Richmond, he was recognized. He was recognized by the slaves, former slaves, who were assisting the Union Army, black men in Union blue, who were putting out the fires and trying to restore order. And they mobbed him. They mobbed him. Just imagine if Mick Jagger were walking down Main Street in your town. He was just simply a heroic presence, and there was jubilation among the slaves when they saw him. That's the historical heart of my story. And all of that stuff takes place in the background as told by two slaves. A 12-year-old slave girl named Miss Francine and a 16-year-old slave boy named Extra Pettigrew. And they narrate all of those reasonably historically accurate events. I took some creative license where necessary. They narrate all of those events from different perspectives. Miss Francine is housebound but forced to leave on her own. Extra Pettigrew is conscripted to help with the Union Army in putting out the fires, and then he has unique experiences of his own. And that's the novel. And I did some research ahead of this and discovered, to my surprise, that remarkable presence of Abraham Lincoln in the enemy capital on Tuesday, April the 4th, 1865, had never been explored in fiction, and it's actually very little written about in nonfiction simply because it was one of these secret visits. It's like when President Obama or any other president is in a war zone, generally no one knows about it until Air Force One is wheels up, as the expression goes, and they're leaving the danger area. Well, no one knew that Lincoln was going to be there, but he was recognized by the slaves and he was mobbed, and then after he was gone, history had very little repertorial fact to draw on except that he was there. Images of him there were fanciful. Some pictured him in a fancy carriage and others pictured him even on horseback. But in my novel, he walked up through town, and then finally they got their act together and put him in a buggy and rode him out of town in a horse-drawn buggy. So that's the novel. It's called Shadows in the Fire, and I am a native Richmonder. I knew all about this growing up. I'm a great-grandson of the Confederacy. 3 of my 4 great-grandfathers wore Confederate gray. The 4th great-grandfather was too old, so I guess he got a pass from the conscription. And I think it's a terrific book. We're looking to get good reviews now, or at least reviews, and hoping for good reviews. And if you would like to purchase Shadows in the Fire, you can do so. Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Indie.com, and they're also, copies are also in brick and mortar stores throughout America and a bookstore near you. Thank you very much.